evaluation, it's important to reflect on what you're trying to achieve and the way that you're trying to achieve that before you go and look at how you're going to evaluate it. It's important to kind of revisit what you're trying to achieve, and also, because it's people-centred, to refocus your project on people, because sometimes we can get caught up in these grand objectives and outcomes, and we can forget about people, and that it's actually people that will achieve those outcomes. The purpose of the youth peer education evaluation is to evaluate the effectiveness of the approach, because the Australian Red Cross has been using this approach for the past 10 years in its various programs with other countries, national societies, and so they wanted to look, after 10 years they wanted to stop and look at whether it's been an effective approach from a perspective of beneficiaries. So what has been the impact at that beneficiary level, at that sort of grassroots level.
The evaluation's trying to document what has been achieved by the project over the last 3 years. This project had two very strong focuses to it. One focus was supporting the peace-building process and reducing tensions between people who had been in conflict with each other. And the second objective was to combine this with some increasing of awareness of health and hygiene issues in their communities. So the purpose of the evaluation was to see how much progress and how well the two Red Crosses had done that.
So I'm looking at, for example, the increased level of community awareness now about disasters. I'm also looking at one of the other indicators they originally designed was that they wanted the staff of Bali chapter to have increased capacity to manage programs. So I am now examining how well those indicators have actually been met.
The guiding principles of people-centred monitoring, evaluation and learning are really that any sort of change that you try to create comes down to change within people. So even if you had an environmental project or maybe an engineering project or a water and sanitation project, the way to create change is through people, because it's by people's actions and behaviour that we're trying to change, whether it's in how their capacity or how they engage with each other or with the environment, or in this case education and knowledge. So people-centred monitoring, evaluation, learning really focuses on that change within people, and particularly their behaviour and practice change.
Basically that the highest quality information is going to come from the people themselves that you're working with. So the focus of the evaluation has been predominantly on getting feedback from the communities and doing various exercises with the community to find out more about their knowledge of health and hygiene practices, how high their awareness is, what their views are and the views of others of how this project contributed to the peace process, getting that feedback. So a lot of the emphasis is on discussions with people from the communities, men and women, also with people from parts of government like the Ministry of Health, people who have been involved in peace-building processes, to get their views and feedback and see what kind of picture we're getting out of that, of what's happened over the last 3 years.
So after the meeting with the Red Cross in Melbourne, we'd mapped out what were the key things that I was going to focus the evaluation on. So that was looking at process, like what had happened, the There was a big emphasis on looking what was the difference between how the approach had been implemented in Yunnan and how it had been implemented in Cambodia. The second was impact, looking at the change amongst beneficiaries and key stakeholders. So looking at people's stories, like collecting people's stories is a big emphasis in this evaluation. And the third area was learning. So what has worked in the context of Cambodia and Yunnan and what hasn't, and what could we do differently.
One key memory from me from the 2-day workshop that I did with the HIV coordinators, we did an exercise which is called a timeline exercise, where you look at, we had a whole wall covered with from what happened from the very beginning to the current stage of the HIV program. And what amazed me was the wealth of knowledge and information that we had in these HIV coordinators. It was a 2-hour exercise, but I felt we really got to the core of some of the issues and constraints, and it was also able for me to be able to understand some of the lessons that we'd learned through the program. It was a really great activity.
In order to capture the stories of all the various people that have been involved, I've used focus group discussions, particularly with the beneficiaries, and then from there selected a few key informants, I guess, to conduct semi-structured interviews with, or in-depth interviews, so to draw out more of those personal stories of change.
The evaluation had 3 components, and unfortunately for the HIV technical review and the beneficiary review, we had planned initially for it to be an overlap, but due to time issues that wasn't possible. So I feel in hindsight it would have been much more beneficial for the beneficiary evaluator to be involved more with my work. For example, the issues of volunteer retention came up quite a lot, and it would have been good to pursue this more at the stakeholder beneficiary evaluation.
As part of the evaluation, one of the also difficult challenges is to try and tease out where that level of awareness has actually arisen from. For example, is it related to the work of Bali Red Cross, or is it related to other factors in the community or by local government? Because I'm needing to evaluate the impact, the direct impact from Bali Red Cross's activities. So I need to not take things at face value, is one of my key learnings from this project. I need to really flesh out the detail behind that and just see where that learning's come from.